Hello guys, and welcome back to today's episode of The Soul Spiral. Today I have Kiera Louise Douglas here with me. We're going to be having another beautiful soul-sending, expanding conversation. Kiera is a Zentai Shiatsu practitioner. She facilitates women's rites of passage ceremonies like first moon, first bleed, and blessing ways. And she's all about connecting to the land and our creative sides as women through weaving and movement and just being a really embodied human. Really, we have such expanded conversations, me and her, talking about our masculine, our feminine sides, and really integrating the two. And we also going on and on and on about the 5 elements. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Kiera. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing and a pleasure.
Yeah, the blessing and the pleasure is all mine for sure. Thank you. I had such a beautiful morning with Kiera. I've received a Zentai Shiatsu session this morning, which was really grounding for me. And then we did a beautiful yoga class at the Zentai
Healing Center.
Healing Center. I was like, what is it called here? And now we're podcasting. What an amazing day.
So full of goodness.
Yes. So, Kiera, I usually start the conversation off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and to how you became the embodied human, focusing on women's rights and the beautiful connection with the land that you love to do. How have you become this person in front of me today?
Thank you for opening that. So my life began in Cairns. I grew up and I was a home birth. Wow. And that's actually where I took my first breath. And I think that's a really significant and poignant part of our life cycles is our birth. Definitely. And how that has had an impact on our lives. And so for me, having a home birth in a beautiful family home that we lived in with our small family business next door, which was a hostel, had a huge impact on my life, where having lots of people in the space, as soon as I was born, there was 15 people in the room.
Wow.
Yeah. And so before the midwife had actually arrived, the midwife was like, Mum birthed me, was full power, like, woo, I'm coming into this world. And I'm here and ready. And it's quite a euphoric sensation that my mum describes it as. So such a blessing. Yeah. And to be birthed that way and come into this dimension through like deep ecstasy, you know?
Yeah.
But I think upon reflecting on that, of having 15 different visitors and guests in this space, I'm a very social being.
Yeah.
And all through my upbringing as a child, we had lots of people, and it was quite a dynamic way of living with people from all over the world coming, a diverse range of atmosphere together.
And this is because your parents owned a hostel.
Yeah. And so that's had a big impact on my life. And throughout the years, we my parents had the intention to travel overseas because they love traveling. That's why they had a hostel. And so growing up, seeing many different cultures and different countries and ecosystems, and just the way that a worldly view has had a huge imprint for me. So I'm really grateful that my parents graced me with this life opportunity growing up. And through high school, still very social, coasting through and loving life, but I was always attracted to children, and so I moved forward in studying primary education. Previous to that, worked in childcare and always worked with children, even role playing as a young girl, like I'm the mum and, and we'll have the baby and be the babysitter, and just this nurturing quality within me that comes forth of that mother archetype of the earth. And so I studied primary education and was a teacher for 3.5 years, and it served me for the time and it was beautiful, but I needed to expand and life changes happened, and I decided to take a year off. And within that year of expansion and self-expression and really allowing the space for self-identity to come forth of who actually am I've landed here at Zentai. And there's been so much growth, and rather than going out and going overseas, which was my original plan, it's allowed me to actually go inwards and connect through my spiritual realm of like an esoteric, I guess, in a sense, or to really tap into my inner knowing rather than going outwards. It's like, this is my first proper winter on Sunshine Coast. Like living in Cairns, it's so humid and hot. Yeah. And so having the winter has allowed me to go inwards and slow down and have the stillness to really explore what is that deep core within.
Beautiful.
And it's led me to here.
And it's so funny, we actually met at a women's circle, and you and I both sort of work in this realm quite a lot and can see the power and the importance in connecting with the different archetypes that we experience as women through our life cycles. And when I first met you and you said that you did blessing ways, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to know someone that like connects with these sorts of things, because it's so important, and something that I think a lot of people that grow up mainly in cities and things like that really lack the experience of having those celebrations of those rites of passage. And so why do you find that so important, and like where does it speak to your heart within those aspects?
That's beautiful, thank you. I see it as such a valuable, poignant moment in time, because we go through these life phases and cycles, and they're massive transitions for the individual. I know that I felt even in my menarche that we experience on a physical level. There's hormones and, things are changing in our physical body. We're growing breast or pubic hair, maybe skin and different things like that. But there's also on an emotional level, there's also on a spiritual level, and an intellectual level as well, and our maturity. So I think it really needs to be highlighted that it needs to be a deep honoring in that phase of life, of that transition that we're going through and embarking on, and that we're not alone within that.
Yeah, so true. Like that importance of community in those aspects, and that's like coming back to such tradition of like more Indigenous type of living, I guess, of having that community to have that honoring. What was your first bleed like?
It was at school, and I was on the way to English class, and my friends had their periods, and I was like kind of excited for mine at the time, and because they all were getting it, and we were all like kind of celebrating together. And Mum had said, when the time comes, let me know, we can talk about it. And we had some little sex education at school, but there wasn't richness behind it that I felt now reflecting. And I got it, and it was kind of, oh, that's that, here's a pad, and move on. And it just wasn't really signified a moment. It was just that's that, and this is all it is. And so with that, I think it's really important to educate prior and make it really common conversations with your children, with yourself, connecting as a mother, being the example for your child, so that she can see you're connecting with your own cycle, so then she does the same when it happens for her. And that you're in cycle with her, and you're noticing those changes and being present with the young daughters and noticing what the changes are in the physical body. It's like, oh, this time is coming, and really speaking to what it is that is physically changing.
And do you think there's do you think that just living and being open with that experience, like from the get-go, no matter the age of your children, do you think that's where some of the importance in the piece of that lies? Because like I feel like there's a level of hiding that goes on. I experienced, like, I definitely like knew my mum was experiencing something, but it really didn't conceptualize to me until I was maybe like 9 or 10. But I think there was a level of like hiding, or like hiding the pads or like not talking about it? And do you think that if there was more openness, then that would make that experience easier?
Yeah, I definitely feel there needs to be open transparency.
Yeah.
And age appropriate.
Yeah.
Of what the connection is, whether it's like getting them connected to their own genitals and exploring and knowing what the different symptoms are, or exploring themselves, and so that they know different situations if it's warning signs to take action. But so age appropriate is really important to consider. Yeah. But definitely having transparency in just sharing
when the questions come up. Yeah.
Hiding it.
Yeah. So responding when the curiosity arises, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And do you think there's also, you know, there's so much when kids are little, like of calling like genitals like not by their like real names. Like what's your opinion on that, and what do you feel? Do you think that that's like, obviously coming from like a school teacher background as well, do you think that I know that there's been aspects of that hindering maybe children that have gone through trauma of like being able to communicate what's actually happened? Where do you think the importance lies in using like correct terminology for genitals and things like that as well?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, I think that it's important to be really clear and share what it is. And it seems really like obvious to me that this is what that is. When you're with children in particular, when you're explaining what a butterfly does, for example, you go into the detail of it rather than just saying that's a butterfly, but so that they can understand and explore it. You don't say that it's a leaf. You know, you want them to have that vocabulary so that they can fully have the contextual understanding for later on in life, or if there's confusion that comes up, and around those areas where trauma can happen. It's really vital.
I really like this like theme of transparency through this like a young age, and then like we kind of move into that maiden age of that like pre-motherhood. What does that mean to you when you think of like that maiden time? And how do you like to embody that when you're stepping into that as well?
The maiden time, I resemble it to spring.
Yeah.
But also the time of day. I like to look at the time of day as a cycle as well, because it's all a cycle. This is a teaching from my beautiful mentor, Gillian Zamaro, and her teachings come from Jane Hardwick Collins, and she's created this beautiful cycle. If you haven't heard of it, maybe have a look it up online. And it's a daily cycle, then it's a monthly moon cycle, a menstrual cycle, with also the seasons on the macro full year cycle. Yeah. And so the way I like to look at it is like spring is the bud after the seed's planted and born. It's coming up into its bud and germinating and sprouting outwards. And when you think about like 6 a.m. in the morning, what's happening in the morning, it's a really like crisp time where the birds start singing and chirping and things are coming alive and awake, and it's like really quite that energizing feeling that's coming forth of springtime, you know, when it's just been really cold and we've been hibernating, and now it's like, oh, we're coming out and exploring the world. And so in maidenhood, that's what I feel is the time for, is to explore all of ourselves and the world, and have an understanding of what's around us, so we have a deeper understanding of who we are and what we want to offer when we do move into the next phase of our life.
And where do you think issues arise later in life when we don't fully embody like our maiden time, and then like maybe we move into mother too quickly? And then do you think that can create issues in terms of like feeling like a loss for the past? Or
I feel like everything has its divine perfect timing,
of course.
But there's a big transition in motherhood, which I feel really strongly about, more so than the menarche as well, but having experience with lots of mothers around me, and I feel like there's something deep within me that's my lineage as well, because this is I'm always been drawn to the mother. I've always been drawn to support mothers, to be the mother, to be this archetype of full bloom, summer blossoming, glowing, radiant woman. This is the peak of the fullness. And so I've always really valued the mother, but I feel that with not having these rites of passages acknowledged, there's a big transition that is lacked there. So a lot of women don't know how to deal with the death of their maidenhood, or to let that go, because they're maybe not quite ready, like you're speaking to, but also not ready to embrace the changes and be fully in surrender and flow with the children and letting them guide us. And so I feel that's probably where the key issue could arise, rather than if it's too early or too late. It's more so around the fact that we're not having these sacred ceremonies to all gather, the women as well as the men and women. I think it's equally important for the masculine and the males, but to come together in community to really allow this mother to be fully seen, fully heard, witnessed in this process as she's physically moving, but spiritually and emotionally and on her psychic level moving in a huge way. So having that space held for her with other women just pouring love into her and nurturing her and supporting her in whatever form that looks like, because we all have different skills. That's why it takes a village to gather and to support.
And what sort of things do you think that, like, because there are some people that are like, I don't have a community, like I don't have that support around me, I'm just like home by myself, like whatever it is. What sort of things would you suggest in that aspect of how to create more community for yourself, but also for others, to be of service for others in that space as well?
A pattern that I see that reoccurs, and what I can see in others is obviously something within myself, so I do acknowledge that, is asking for help. It's a big one, and it can be challenging at times, but once we ask, then that opens up the gateways. And if we never ask, then it's always a no. But if we ask, it's either a yes or a no. But at least there's that potentiality of the opening, the options that could arise from within that. And it might be that if I ask you, you might not be available and you say no, but you know somebody that is. So even if it is a no, it's still an opening for another yes further down the track.
I love that. Ask or otherwise you don't receive. And there's like such a key thing about the feminine and being able to receive, isn't there? And so if we can never like even ask the question to receive, how can we ever truly honor our feminine side in a way? And also, like you were saying, it is very feminine just to receive, and so sometimes we do have to use our yang masculine within us to step up and ask. And sometimes it's also that being open to receiving, it's actually coming to us and we're like, I can do it, I can hold it all together, and I've got the weight on my shoulders, and that's why often we're getting these tight shoulders and I can do it all. But it's like, we don't have to do it all. We weren't born to do it all. That's why we are social beings, and we have each other to support one another. Exactly. It makes you think of like, carrying the mountains on your back, but it's like the mountain's only heavy if you decide you have to pick it up, like, but if you did it with lots of other people, it wouldn't be so heavy as well. Talk me a little bit through blessing rays, because there are probably people that are listening that don't even know what that is or what that experience is like.
It's so magical. I think gathering with community in heart sharings is magical.
Definitely.
But especially a blessing way, or a mama blessing, some people call it as well. It's basically a ceremony for the mother. And rather than a baby shower that is showering the baby with gifts and objects and things and materialistic things, it's around creating a space that's in a held container to really honor the woman who's transitioning by having heart sharing. It can take many, many different forms, but it may be showering her with love. It may be showering her with our touch. It may be singing. It's really about allowing her to be seen and to be honored and to be graced with the blessings that we all have to offer of love. And it was also a really beautiful time to allow her to speak any fears that she wants to release, or it may be that she's speaking to what she actually wants to call in for her birth, and allowing that to be caught, her stories to be shared and caught. And it can be a time where the elders come and share their wisdom, or women who have gone through the experience to share the positives around birth. And that's what I really like to highlight, is staying in the positives of birth, because we can get really caught into all the stories, and sometimes our own traumas come into play with those stories. But it's really about lifting her up and nourishing the mother rather than depleting her. So it's lifting her up so she can go into her birth experience and go into that vortex of a portal of birth and fully have deep trust in her inner knowing that she can do that. Her body has a natural intelligence to grow a baby for 9 months. Her body also has this natural intelligence to birth this. That's what this body, as a female body, is born to do, I believe. And it's just such a beautiful time to really empower the mother and allow her to have that full strength and power, but also the gentleness and softness to surrender into her heart space, to connect with her baby and connect with her own spirit to birth the baby.
Wow, so beautiful. Like, and I just can't wait. But also I can imagine there's probably, my mind goes to like some women, even like my mother, like listening, that didn't get to have that experience, and now waking up and realizing that that's a possibility, almost the grief that like comes with that. Have you ever hosted like, I don't know, a circle for women who didn't get to go through that, to be able to like re-experience that upliftingness around the birth stories?
That's a really beautiful like inspiration for me. So thank you for igniting that within me and like flaming it in.
Yeah.
Because that's a beautiful idea. Something that I do offer is, and I just did yesterday, was such a beautiful ceremony, is a session post-birth and postpartum, which is closing the bones. And it's a Mexican ancient tradition where you wrap them in a cloth that's woven, natural cotton woven in Mexico, and it's wrapping the mother into like a cocoon, and it allows all of the organs and the bones to come back into place, but it also allows the spirit to come back into the body. And within that process, it's a one-on-one session that I do, and we prior to laying down and going through the practice, we I allow that space for her to share and to share her birth story, and to reflect and look back on what it is that may have came up for her, or she may have wanted to do differently, things like that, but to be able to release anything that's feeling stuck, because it's all a part of the beautiful process, no matter which way it goes. And so we do a burning ceremony and an intention setting within that space, and then close it with the closing the bones. But I guess in that instance, it can also correlate to if someone hasn't had the space to be fully honored within a whole group setting, or have a community. So people who don't have community could reach out and have one-on-one sessions like that to be able to feel supported and nourished in those sort of ways.
You spoke then about the spirit returning to the body. What is this process, or like when is the spirit leaving the body through birth? Talk me through what you mean by that.
Yeah, I would like to understand it more, but I haven't experienced it myself to have a fully embodied articulation. Yeah. But I guess when I've witnessed birth and mother birthing, it's such a portal space where it's really accessible to go into other dimensions, where you're so close to birthing new life into this realm, but also so close to death, because your body is going through huge mechanisms of opening and expanding to allow the vessel, like your vessel of your pubic, to like birth through this child. But when the mother is going through this process, she almost goes into like a transcendental state. And so sometimes through that, it's like our spirits can be in other worlds, I guess, is what it could be. And so it's just allowing that space to come back within more so, and feeling completely held and enclosed with the cloth wrapped around it, almost like a mummy, where it can come back into ourselves. And it's a really nourishing, grounding practice to bring us back home.
It sounds very much like, you know, there's this big expansion that occurs, and that closing the bones is like that real integration of like, here I am back in the physical realm, in this physical body that I've chosen, and how can I be integrated now that almost like my soul has gone through this new experience, and now there's another soul here with me, and like integrating. That's what I'm understanding from what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. So it's like another process of honoring what you have just gone through. So there's like the pre with the blessing, the mama, and then it's like having the birth experience. But after the postpartum is like, they call it the fourth trimester, because that fourth trimester is just as important of nourishing ourselves and taking it slow with the baby. And but also there's all these different transitions. I've got a whole being outside of myself now that I have to adapt to, and they don't even speak to communicate it. I have to learn all these different things and constantly transition and change. So it's embracing that changes and honoring the birth has just, what was the birth? You're here and now with this baby. So it's allowing that space to reflect back on that as well.
Yeah, amazing. Just another question came in my mind, but I want to talk a little bit more like about women's circles with you, because, you know, we both sort of sit in this realm so strongly. What is your favorite thing about connecting in circle with other women?
It's hard to pick a favorite.
Top 3 or whatever.
I really value heart sharing and having a space where it's available for all, because as human beings, we are social beings, but we thrive from connection and intimacy. And with women's circles and heart sharings that I've been a part of, it allows a space where you can share authentically as much as you want. You can share deep-rooted feelings that arise. You can share what comes up just on the surface level of what's arising in this moment. It's the wind on my body and I'm feeling cold and all, but it's sharing, and it's a space that's safe and supported without people having to reach out and just sit next to you and hear you. And there's no hierarchy, because we're in circle. We're sitting and everyone's of equal, and we're all sharing and holding the space together. It's not one or the other and this person or that person. It's a union of coming togetherness. And I reflected on my birth with all the people. I really value people coming together, but coming together for a positive outcome of love. And I feel through feeling-based relating is a way to allow our hearts to be shared, to get to the deepness, to allow the joy to come forth and to allow that love to flow.
Yeah, I so love that. I think as well, I feel like we live in a society that really kind of bases a lot of things off negative bonding, like, and you really notice this. And so stepping into that realm of like more, you know, heart-centered bonding is so powerful, and such a way to like reclaim sovereignty in our beings. Because, and you'll notice it when you've been in that space like longer, where you've been having more of that heart-centered bonding, and then you step back into some other situation with maybe some people that you used to be with, and the negative bonding comes out again, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this doesn't sit right. And like in this society that we live in at the moment, and everything that's happening in the world, like there's so much negative bonding going on, and people like striving for that because that's the only way they know how to connect. I love about women's circles that it like really brings you home to yourself, and there's that deep listening that you're talking about in community, but also there's like this remembrance of like the real integrated person I am, like the authentic person I am. I'm not just like this thing or that thing. Even if I am, you know, in one circle sharing, and it's like perceived like maybe something like I'm complaining about something, the way that it happens, it kind of like comes out, but then you sort of come back around in your own spiral of yourself in that moment, and you're like, oh, but this is actually what I've learned out of that. And then you can actually get the perspective just organically. Because but in other instances, people would be like automatically responding to what you're saying, like in conversation. And so the space that allows that integrity to like figure things out for yourself is just so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And what it, just from your sharing just now, what it reflected in me is like the active listening and deep listening of each other, but it's also a deeper listening within, like you're sharing, is, and being fully present with whoever's speaking and listening, not thinking about what am I going to say or this and that, or even like when someone's speaking, active listening, really being active and paying attention to what they're saying, and not feeling, what does that show me in mine? It's actually just listening to allow them to be heard. And then when sharing in the moment and feeling into what it is that arises for myself when I'm sharing, for example, but it allows a space for me to have a deep listening within.
I really, really feel that and resonate with that. And I think that, you know, it's that first women's circle you go to that like you're doing the sharing circles happening, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Like, well, what should I say about this thing?
It still happens sometimes to me today.
Oh yeah, no one's perfect. But in that first one, it's really noticeable. And then you go to a number of them, and then all of a sudden one day it just drops in. You're like, this isn't about me in this moment. Like I'm just here listening to like fully hear the other person. And like you're saying, like it ebbs and flows, and you know, it's just like meditation. But when you have that like realization in your being of like, oh, this is actually a communal experience in this, it changes everything. Because all of a sudden you realize that when it's your turn, you'll just speak from your heart, and whatever will come out. And that, like you're saying, is like true deep listening of yourself that you've activated from listening to others. And I really just love that, and the value of not reaching out when someone is speaking or going through hurt and feeling into a space that may be painful. And like you were sharing of bonder, what was the word? Negative bonding. Negative bonding. Was there. I'm like, I don't want to talk about bondage. Negative bonding. And so like even sometimes sharing and the act of reaching out and holding the person can be negative bonding in the sense that that's a way that I get comfort, a way that I get attraction by, or being in my sadness and someone will reach out, so that's how I get affection and feel accepted. And it's a space where we all just stay in our sovereign beings to allow that person to go through the motions, to express, to feel through their own integral being with a space that's, and I've been reflecting with a friend recently of, it's not space holding, it's like space protecting, because we're not holding them and nourishing them like a baby and cradling them, and because we're just protecting the space to allow them to move through the space that they're holding for themselves. Allowing that true sovereignty of each woman or man or whoever is in that space of listening. So it's like, I love where we've gone in this conversation. Like I really love this how can we bring this into our day-to-day life more? Because that magic happens in circle, because there's a level of facilitation going on, but also like once you start to go to these, you realize that when you're in that space, that's what's happening. And I think the more that is practiced, the more that we can practice that in our day-to-day life.
The more, that's the whole purpose, I feel, of it, is to be able to integrate that into our everyday interactions when we're relating on all levels, with our friendships, with our mothers, with our fathers, with our children if we have them. And how can we bring that into our everyday life?
What is that? I have a tool. I want to know if you have any tools to help. Well, there's one, and I think a mentor might have shared this with me at some point. But from being as a kinesiologist and being in clinic with people, it was like, how can I really show them that I'm like listening and feeling they feel like heard in that setting? And one thing that I do is it's with the eyes. So like if I'm looking at someone and I open up my peripherals, and so I like open more expansiveness view of what I'm looking at them, my eyes relax and there's a softer gaze. And through doing that, it actually brings a lot of presence into my own being. So I can be fully present with you, like I'm doing it to you now. Can you see my eyes?
Feel it.
Oh, hey.
Quiet eyes.
But that really was like when I noticed myself, like, because we often like look around when we're not like, when we're thinking, or like when someone else is talking and we don't really want to, we're already thinking, we're often looking around. So if you like truly want to be present with someone, like how can you look upon them, but then not like stare them down like a crazy, but actually like relax your gaze and soften your gaze so that you're actually fully present with them in that moment. And that actually calms your own nervous system down as well. So then we're sitting in this reciprocity state with the other person. So that's like something that I really try to embody in my day-to-day life, to bring more of that sharing circle feeling through in my conversations. I mean, let's be real though, it doesn't always happen, like, and I definitely like go off and do things, but when I really like bring the awareness in and that consciousness in, that's the practice that I like find really beneficial.
I really value that as well. I love eye contact, and having a soft, gentle gaze really brings in that loving awareness to the being as well. And I like to incorporate that as much as I can and bring it back, because sometimes again I'll wander off and become abstract somewhere else, and then bring it back to present. Who am I speaking to in front of me right now? Let's connect through our eyes. Something that came for me was allowing the space for the person to communicate and to speak and to be heard, but with that uninterruption. So just being there and just to listen and hold the space for them in that way of not interrupting and allowing them to get everything that they need. And sometimes there's a pause and there's still more. So it's like allowing the space to have like a little leeway even after. Which brings us slowness. And it's definitely something that I think that aspect of it is something I need to work on. I definitely feel I do embody it other times, but then sometimes Alex is like, he'll just keep talking. He'll be like, don't interrupt me. When you're in partnership, it's so much easier to like bypass those things of like almost like respect in that moment, because you're so used to just, being back and forth or whatever it is. And it's something that I have to constantly remind myself, like, hey, like you'll get your turn. Like, it's not like you don't come from a place of lack in the conversation of like, I need to put my piece in too now, because otherwise I'm not going to be heard. They're not going to hear me. And, there's sometimes that you're in interactions with people and you don't find those moments, but then often when it then dies down with them, maybe if you take that moment and you actually allow even more space, they'll start to notice that they haven't allowed any space for the back and forth to happen. Do you notice that? Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's nice to flow with interacting. It's like dancing, it's like this person leads and the next person, and it's allowing that space to flow where it's coming back and forth. And other times it's also poignant and valuable if it's especially heart feelings and heart sharings, is to allow that uninterruption to be fully heard. But in everyday conversations as well, there is a flow.
So true. Yeah, I hope like on some level that this inspires people to like go and look up a women's circle in their area, or look up Kiera or I to come to like the offerings that we have, because there's so much power in that connecting in that space of circle. Something also I wanted to talk to, because I know that it's something very close to your heart, is weaving. And I feel like this almost like leads into more of the different other life cycle points as well. I want to open it up to you to where you want to take it from there, because obviously we've hit motherhood. So where from there would you like to take us, Kiera?
Well, I love crafting.
Yeah.
And using my hands to create art, and allowing my hands to be questions, and what is it that it wants to like morph into or shape into. And our hands are actually an extension of our hearts as well. So I create different offerings and then share them, and I feel that's such a beautiful gift. But
that's so beautiful. I love that so much. It's just like, it makes so much sense as well, because the heart meridian comes through the hand, and like to be able to create something and then give it as a gift, it is an extension of your heart.
It is.
I just want to acknowledge how beautiful that is.
Thank you. And so the spaces that I like to create with workshop style crafts, whether it be weaving baskets or macrameing or making feather fans, whatever form it evolves into, it's to allow the space for our creativity to come forth. And it's a process-based learning and going through the process rather than getting to the destination of the outcome of like, oh, I'm making a basket. It's actually what's arising as I am doing this process. Because for me, in my practices and teachings and the processes that I've gone through, is those poignant moments of reflecting what is it that's coming up for me and arising as I'm crafting. Is it frustration? Is it joy? Is it that perfectionism? And I'm like, oh, I'm really like not getting it. It's directly related to our birth.
Wow.
And the impacts, I believe, and other people tend to believe, is the impacts that we've had, and the imprint of our birth story of how we entered the world can portray into what we create in our creative ventures. So whether it be craft with our hands, or things that we're in our businesses, or we want to flourish and plant seeds into, or it might be a plant that we're planting. So however we do certain things in our life with creativity is often reflected back to our birth story. And so
I'm just getting so excited. I love where this conversation's going.
For my workshops, I like to create circle where it opens the space for heart sharing, but also intention setting. So while we are weaving or crafting and creating, what is it that we want to weave into the vessel that's going to take shape and form itself? And so what is that going to bring forth with the intentions that we're planting the seeds into? And through the processes as it moves along is just simple reminders that it's like, what's coming up, and just constantly sharing, okay, what's coming up for us now? And while we're weaving, then it feels so ancient to me. And like what the gatherers in primitive times, the women would do, come together and weave the baskets and share their hearts of what's happening. And the actual rhythmic motion with our hands allows a predictability, and it also releases the hormone oxytocin. So it allows us to come into this meditative state. It's like a flowing meditation, moving meditation for me. Not for all, I understand and respect that, but it releases oxytocin, which allows us to radiate love more to the world and allows us to come into our feminine nature as well. And so while sharing whatever is coming up or arising, it allows a calmness and a self-soothing mechanism. So like we were sharing, of not reaching out to the other women that are next to us when they're going through a grieving process or sharing their hearts. It's a mechanism that can be a tool to regulate our own emotions while we're sharing.
Do you think that's why so many, like, I'm thinking of like ladies like knitting, like in a Western society more so. I mean, obviously still in Eastern and different things like that too, but how that became such a regular thing that people would be knitting and doing this regular thing with their hands because they were seeking back maybe this original weaving or whatever it is,
grinding the grains and like gathering the berries. It's like picking constantly with the hands, or picking the rice, from the fields. Our hand motions constantly moving, and it's like that natural rhythm. Even washing the dishes, and like being really present with it in that slow rhythmic state is allowing that rhythmic motion, because it's like like you're saying, this ancient primitive sensation that we would use and do a part of life that it's kind of lost now, where not for all but for
some, reclaiming maybe is happening.
And the other aspect that I like to incorporate is using natural fibers, so where possible, and using the natural fibers allows the connection to the earth and the connection to Pachamama and Mama Gaia. And with that, it's like allowing the fibers to speak to you. And what is it through that process is like, I could have it completely lets go of the expectation, I guess, of like, I could form this and want it to make it look like that, or someone else next to me. And it's like the fibers are organic and natural, and they're going to take whatever form they want. And so allow them to come through you. You're just the vessel, the channel to allow it to be moved into what it is created into, but having that connection with it to unfold naturally as it chooses.
It sounds like it's really calling a level of surrender within each experience of that, but also coming back to that listening, like you're listening to the fibers and you're listening to the connection to earth, to how it wants to take form, and then taking the the sense of you, Kiera, out of it, or Kristin out of it, and being like, how's creativity moving through me from nature, just like almost like childbirth in a sense. And I find it so, it's just like that full circle. It's like when in our own childbirth, like you say, it creates the creativity, and then there's this level of surrender that needs to happen through that. But then also through our childbirth, if we decide to bear children, there's also that like repeated aspect happening again of that needs, that surrender and that trust of like nature to move through us.
And I also feel like every month we have that opportunity. Definitely. When we're in our moon phase of ovulation, of peaking, and we're like got this full power creative force coming forward, that is like, what are we choosing to create in that time? And so when we come around to our moon time of shedding and bleeding, it's the opportunity to release and let go of what it is that is arising from. Maybe it is the things in childbirth that comes around full cycle again and again, and each layer in each moon phase we have this opportunity. Such women are so magical and powerful that we have this gift to completely shed every cycle. So I agree, when you're bearing children, it's like these layers. We have this opportunity in the maidenhood to really let go and release it all before we do get to that phase. And even if you are past that, into your Marga phase, which is in the autumn, before crone. And in that phase for the Marga, which we haven't really spoke to yet, is like when you're starting to come into menopause. And it's often in our society construct is frowned upon, or negative connotations, where you don't want to get grey hair and wrinkles, and because the maiden is so highlighted, or more so than the mother as well, and the maiden's highlighted of the beauty and the richness there, whereas the Marga is actually such a beautiful, incredible, empowering time where you've just let go of all of the responsibilities in life, and you can come full into yourself again. Plus you have all of this wisdom to reflect on and share. We really need to honor the Margas and connect with the Margas, because they've gone through the life experiences. And but what I was reflecting on is, in the menopause, often if we haven't dealt with certain things of from birth, of our imprinting or negative
aspects where we haven't fully surrendered in other phases of
exactly.
our life.
Thank
Perhaps
you.
like the surrender will be forced upon you when we hit that menopause.
Yeah, and that can be like when we feel the heat because we're trying to burn it away, because we're not bleeding anymore, where we are allowing that to come out. And that can also in menstruation get the cramps and the headaches, because we've got all of this stuff that we need to release and let go of. On a physical, on a physical level it's showing up, but on an emotional level, what is it that we need to really work on or allowed to be acknowledged so that we can let it go? And it's the same with when we come into that later phase in life, when we're in our marga and the heat is burning, trying to burn it all away and dissolve it all,
or we have like crazy blood experiences going on because it's just like so much built up shedding of like the real shedding that needed to happen that never like fully passed in times gone by, maybe.
And same with birth. It's the opportunity. We have so many opportunities in life to really face what it is that needs to be fully released and surrender into, so then we can make way for the possibilities and potency of life.
And then honoring that level of the crone as well, like she is the elder in the community and the real wisdom bringer.
Such mystery. And like the beautiful stillness within that too, and the silence. And I feel, as a maiden myself coming into motherhood, I feel that it's so important that we reach out to crones. Because that's what they do, is they sit back and then their elders time, and it's in the stillness time, and it's like, if people seek my wisdom, they'll come to me. So as my job, I feel, is to reach out and ask the questions and support and nourish them in what way I can to assist them in their transition into the next phase of their life.
Ask for the stories. Ask your mum about her birth story. Ask your grandmother about her birth story. Like we were saying, we could host these things one-on-one and create community for them. But like, if you have your mum still in your life or your grandmother still in your life, and you have the opportunity to ask her and hold space for her to like share her birth story or her story of her first period and things like that, like there's so much power in that. I feel like,
that's like that's like potent.
And
that's where it happens. And obviously there's a sensitivity, because sometimes experiences cannot be so pleasant. But through my own experience of going deep within my own birth story, and then asking my mother, and then her coming with me on a bush camp, and we explored it together. So she was asking her mother, because I was, trying to get it out of her, like, can you ask my grandma? And so I feel really blessed that I've had that opportunity to look and reflect. And I'm noticing within myself of the stories that arise for me and the imprints that I had from my birth, is it goes back and then it goes back, and I'm like, oh, this is ancestral. And I have this opportunity with my mum and my grandma, who's still alive, to do this healing together. And especially before I do have a child myself and bring a child into this world. So I feel blessed and so grateful. So thank you, Mum. I love you.
Thanks, Sally.
And it's really, really just super special. So if you do have that opportunity, definitely take it. And if you don't, that's okay as well. Just sit with the feeling of what
with your own cycle each month, and notice the things that come up and the patterns that keep appearing to you. There's so much wisdom there. And
that's probably another thing, is to connect with your cycle. Connect with, that's where the best place to start would be, is to each month track your cycle. You can get an app online, write it down in a book, in a moon book. Track your cycle, how you're feeling within each phase. Notice the different sensations that come up. What is arising? Maybe there's a common theme that plays out. It's like, and even with your friendships and like how you're interacting, or what is it that you're birthing in creation? Maybe are you feeling more motivated and uplifted in, or are you feeling really to go inwards? And just connecting back in with those regular moon's phases.
Yeah, I'm sure we could have a whole other I actually did a podcast with Alex on that exact topic, so I might link it if anyone's interested, because we could just talk about that stuff for so long. But I want to ask you our questions before we have to, tie things up. Kiera, what is your sun sign, moon, and rising? Well, we know what your sun is.
Yeah.
She's like, wait, I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, hold on a second. My sun is Gemini.
Yeah.
And my moon is Cancer.
Yeah.
And rising, is that what you said?
Or ascendant, same thing.
And my ascendant is in Capricorn.
Oh yeah, I remember that now. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, so
so
cool.
A little bit of a mix there.
It's nice, a nice earthy but airy and watery.
Yeah. And I had a Vedic astrology
you had
reading
one recently. Yeah.
And I'm Sagittarius.
Oh, so you've got I could see that. See that. Especially like all the travel you've done like through your youth and things like that too, and your parents. Yeah, because I guess a lot of our astrology actually comes from our parents as well.
Yeah.
And what's your human design? You recently looked that up too, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm a manifester and generator.
Manifesting generator. Yeah, cool. Let me see. I've just got my questions here. What's your favorite fruit?
Oh, yum. Oh, it's so challenging to pick one. I have pondered on this quite some time. I think I would have to go for a coconut because it's so versatile.
Very true.
You can drink it. You can create so much from it. It's so tasty.
Love it.
Tropical.
Very well-rounded Gemini answer there. If you could return to one moment in your life to re-experience it again, what would you go back to?
Oh,
I should have given you this one beforehand.
But
what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
It was birth.
I knew you were going to say that.
That came to my mind was birth.
Yeah.
Because, it was a really powerful experience for my mother, and to be able to have that lived experience again, to feel it, and maybe even rewrite some of the situations that had arose for me. There was a part of the story that I didn't share, which was around my dad being a home birth, my dad delivering me, and him in fear. And him pushing me, like with fear, like pushing me back in.
Push you back in.
And he jokingly shares that, and I've known this story my whole life. So going deeper into it allowed me to reflect on like, how does this show up in my life of this fear of rejection and limiting myself of expressing myself in certain aspects or situations. And so I feel like we did relive it, Dad and I, with this experience that we have shared a couple of years ago. But I would love to go back to really rewire it back at birth. Of he wasn't pushing me back in, he was actually holding me with his loving hands to protect me and to love me and catch me, rather than going to the earth, and falling. he's there with his loving hands.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you had to pick between the forest or the ocean, what would you choose?
I would definitely be forest fairy.
I thought so.
I do love the ocean too. I'm very dynamic and love both, but I'm definitely drawn to the forest more so.
Is there a certain plant or flower that you connect with or like to work with the most?
There's many. At the moment, the first one that came to my head as like an ally is basil.
I love that. Alex is obsessed with basil.
I haven't been using it as much, but Mum has this big bush too, and I think there's a third one growing now, but they're huge and just abundant. And Isabel Shippard has a beautiful book, and it goes into detail of different herbs and their metaphysical analogies of what they relate to and connect with, and basil is like heart companion and friendship, and it just really resonates in that compassionate way. It
really makes you think of abundance as well, because you like the big basil bush that just like keeps growing and like keeps coming back even when you take some from it. Imagine if your bank account worked like that. It can in some instances. What's your favorite crystal?
clear quartz.
Me too. And
Yeah.
I too. And do you have an animal that you connect with, like your spirit animal, or who you would be if you were an animal?
Yeah, the main ones that come to me, I mean, there's lots. Some people have just one, but I have lots of different ones that come through.
Yeah.
But the one at the moment would be a wolf and a white owl.
I have a white owl.
Cute. But today, when I was giving your treatment, we were laying here, and the kookaburra came and landed on the ledge.
And you're at my house the other day.
So
the
close.
Kookaburras came down so close. Yeah.
And it was just so beautiful because it was over there, further away.
Yeah.
And it came right in. It was looking down, like its head was tilted, and it was, your face was facing it as well at the time, and it was looking at you. And I said, the kookaburras are here watching over you.
You're like, the kookaburra is here for you. I was like,
family.
And when we're in yoga as well, the kookaburras are laughing.
Yeah.
And they're all around my house laughing all the time. Family, did you say? Is that what they're sort of? That's so beautiful. Oh, what a nice note to end on. If people want to get in touch with you, Kiera, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's __ Kiera Louise. Or you can email me at kiera.douglas04@gmail.com.
And I'll put that on the notes as well to make it easy. Oh, thank you for such an amazing conversation.
Thank you. Speaking
to my heart, speaking to our wombs, speaking to all the women and the men too. But yeah, I really, really appreciate it. I'm very grateful to
I appreciate it as well. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.